So let's get underway, shall we? So thank you everyone for coming along. Um, I am here in my capacity as one of the co-leads for the scientific SIG, although really that's an extremely informal position, largely through our own making. Um, but I wanted to provide a little bit of introduction about the group and the overall purpose of it and a kind of state of the union um, about how the group operates and what it does. There's a few slides here just to get things going. So we start with the black swan, and that's really the reason for the group's existence in a nutshell is that a lot of what people tend to do in research computing doesn't really fit with the way that cloud assumes that people consume compute infrastructure. In a cloud, you don't tend to have one project using 95% of the resources and provisioning one software image onto every single node in one move, which can tend to happen in research computing environments. So there are simple examples where it's clear that the way that cloud thinks is actually not quite how research computing is planning to use it. And so we kind of exist to try to advocate for those use cases and also to advocate the opposite direction of talking about the potential and the benefits of open source cloud infrastructure when we meet in scientific computing forums as well. So it's generally a pretty friendly thing. We tend to meet in conferences like this one, and a lot of the open source events that the OpenStack Foundation organizes, or the grassroots community, but also in the high performance computing conference circuit as well. There isn't an awful lot to show in terms of work outputs from the SIG. It used to be a working group, but then we realized that actually work sounds a bit too onerous. So it's more of a special interest sort of thing. It doesn't take any effort to be interested in stuff really, whereas work was really not the idea. But we did produce this book, which is freely available from the OpenStack.org website, and probably a little bit out of date now, but it has 6 main themes within the book. The last one that was added was on federated identity and how to add that into OpenStack environments. So yeah, that's free to download. So the purpose of the group is really about this kind of two-way advocacy of advocating the scientific computing use case in cloud environments and the cloud use case in scientific computing environments, and that's really it in a nutshell. But the main focus and the main way we've been achieving that is really the point about social infrastructure down there, because really the group's a talking shop, and we really try to be a group of friendly fellow travelers. I think there are similar special interest groups for other domains like telcos and so on, and public cloud, but the problem that they have is that they are all inherently competitors with each other, which isn't really, I mean, beyond the academic case, it isn't really the case in research computing, which I think is part of the reason why this group is prosperous and tends to be kind of a friendly forum. So all we have to do is to be a participant in the SIG is to share and to get involved. Get involved in discussions. There isn't really anything else that is expected of people within the scientific SIG. So it's a pretty lightweight kind of organization. I wouldn't say there's anything too onerous about it. And part of the reason that is because everyone who is involved in this sort of this journey from a conventional research computing mindset into a cloud environment is really looking at these similar kind of problems of moving from a more sort of ossified conventional setting for their computing environments into something where there may well be cloud native interfaces that we're exposing to our users. We may well be as Graham was saying this morning, wait, what if you're providing root to users, and is that actually a good idea in the long term? So there's an awful lot of considerations that are being arrived at in a sort of a convergent evolution process at many different places around the world. The group exists and has, I think, around about 300 members distributed globally, and so there's a fairly big forum for people having similar sorts of problems. So on that, I'll cut over there. There is an Etherpad, which I will just open here. And there's a nice big fat link at the top there. If you would like to join the discussion, it's quite helpful to put your name in the Etherpad and maybe a little bit about where you come from and what you're doing. Hey, Bob.
Hey, Stig, how you doing?
Good to hear from you.
You too. I was trying to find the mute button for a minute. Sorry, I couldn't be there in person.
Not at all. Congratulations. So I think the discussion is fairly open. It would be interesting if there's anybody who'd like to get the ball rolling with any information about what they do in the sort of research computing space, and what actually is not working. What are the problems that they have? I think that's usually a good way to get things going. Is what sucks for you, and whether there's anyone else within the group or within the room who has the same issues, and we can try and make those kinds of connections. That's usually a good way to start. Come on, Jeff.
Thanks. So I'll pick up that toss and go with it. I think that's a good way to start. Talk a little bit about what we're doing and what works and doesn't for us. So I'm Jeff Albert. I'm the manager and architect of advanced research computing infrastructure for the University of Victoria in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. We operate the Arbutus Cloud, which is an OpenStack cloud, about 44,000 vCPUs, about 35 petabytes of Ceph behind it. And that's a national infrastructure component for Canada. So it serves both University of Victoria researchers and also researchers at every other research institution in the country. Part of a partnership called the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, which funded Arbutus and is funding its renewal right now. What works well for us? Everything works well for us. Our life is joyous in every way. Some challenges. Upgrades obviously have been a big challenge for us. We're on Usuri. We love Usuri. We love it so much we might never leave. Yeah, some challenges there. And honestly, the biggest challenge for us has been getting past infrastructure as a service. We have a super good, super reliable infrastructure as a service offering with OpenStack and Ceph. People love it. They would really love to do other things above it without having to build on it the way that you do. And so far, we've struggled to get the resources, the time, the space away from operating the base infrastructure to move up to that level. So that's kind of the big challenge for us.
Oh, that's a really interesting point. And I think you can see a nice success story for OpenStack if it becomes less visible to the end users, and that they're using a notebook service or some other compute platform, and they don't know that there's a cloud behind it. That's actually a really great outcome. Quite a hard outcome to hit. I can pick up on that actually. I think so. We run a cloud internally within the business, and it's called the Scalable Metal Service, and it's based in Iceland, and it is powered entirely on donated hardware and free electricity. So it's a pretty cheap kind of scroungy kind of environment. We put it together with as much sort of resourcefulness as we can. This brings in interesting problems. So we did have a donation of brand new hardware. Well, not brand new, as in 3-year-old brand new hardware for us, which replaced our previous generation of hardware, which was in a part of the data center where it was essentially pulled by the breeze from the outside. They just opened these vents on the side of the building. And because this was a bare metal cloud and it was in the Icelandic wind, the temperature of the nodes when they're in service would go down to about 8 Celsius. And when they're out of service, God knows what's happening to them. But they soon became a little bit knackered, a little bit corroded, and a little bit on fire as well. So we had to replace that kit. It was old Sandy Bridge hardware, so probably 12 years old at this point. And so yes, we have a new generation of kit which we've paid some money to actually move indoors within the walls of the data center now. So, but all of our work is done, and a lot of sort of open source supporting work is done using this free resource that we've sort of scrounged together in Iceland. It has problems of its own, but got to say it's running Caracal now, and I think we're pretty happy with the system that it's providing. Do you want to pass the mic? Yeah.
I can go next. A bit of a different style thing. I work on the Chameleon test bed. I'm based out of Chicago with Kate over there. We're running an almost entirely bare metal cloud, or at this point, I think 5 or 6 federated clouds. And almost everything is being used through Blazor reservations instead of sort of on-demand resources. And I think we've had a lot of success with it. But a lot of our challenges in terms of user experience, I think, come around from exposing, how to expose information to users that doesn't fit the traditional VM workflow. So if someone's reserved 2 nodes and they've used those 2 nodes, there's no more nodes available. It's not because they've filled up a quota, it's just that there's nothing left to schedule to, and all the feedback the user gets is no hosts available. And I think there's probably some work that could be done to kind of expose that information to the actual requester. The other part I think we have is a lot of our users are students in classroom projects using OpenStack for the first time, and the abstraction of an OpenStack project doesn't necessarily map well to a classroom with a bunch of students who shouldn't have access to each other's stuff. So I think those are some of the top-of-mind challenges we've been thinking about.
Yeah. Just a thought on the no valid host thing. That even when you're not using reservations, if you're just providing a cloud service and if you're not giving the users sort of a no valid hosts quite often, then you probably bought too much hardware. It's a difference between that sort of public cloud illusion of infinity and a private cloud where you want to be running it as close to full as possible all the time. And it is an interesting problem that on-premise cloud, private cloud infrastructure has that doesn't exist in the public domain. Blazor's, I mean, we use it quite a bit, obviously, and it's getting a lot of attention at the moment. Are you seeing that with Chameleon as well?
Seeing what in particular?
The level of interest in Blazor use cases.
I don't know that it's changed too much for us because it's been our primary interface for so long with these bare metal nodes. What I do think we're seeing more of with, we've been at much higher utilization than we have been in the past. Just demand overall is much higher. I think we're seeing the case where the cloud has run out of a given resource is much more common for us than it used to be. It used to be relatively uncommon. People would have, they would have reservations for the stuff that existed. But I think we're just seeing more people who are less knowledgeable and hit more of these edge cases.
Mike? Preemptible instances in Blazor? Yes. I'm not sure if it's upstream, but there is certainly a sort of proof of concept implementation of preempting, and so you can run sort of a second tier of instance in between the reservations. So it's it's a bit of it's a partial solution for preempting and making use of that opportunistic resource. Julia, put your hand up.
Sorry.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think I'm aware of any kind of formal connection between the discussions in the SIG and the TC, other than people like you being part of both. Are you still part of both? Or? Yeah, yeah. No, that's a very good point. Right. Who's got the mic? Julian.
I don't know if we're ready to move off the Blazor, and then I can hand the mic to you if you want to talk about it. I'm going to go in a different direction. Okay, well, I'm going to go in a different direction. So I'm Julian Pistorius. I currently work at Indiana University. I work in a different team than Jeremy and Mike. I work on the support side, software engineering background. I also work with Chris Martin on Exosphere, which is a friendly user interface aimed at researchers. I don't come from infrastructure side. Half my job is working with researchers helping them use both Jetstream as well as our internal research cloud at Indiana University. So when Jeff, you said, what do we do beyond infrastructure as a service? I'm coming from Excel, working with researchers, and they're the advanced ones are trying to get their colleagues into our studio, into Jupyter Labs. So my interest is almost like advocating for the easy-to-use user interfaces, whether it's a Jupyter Hub, Binder Hub situation. I know that Azimuth has really good integration. I think the world seems to, as well as Chameleon, for example, with Trovy and all the things that they try and provide as useful and friendly user interface as possible. I think there's a lot of possibilities there, maybe some collaboration. I don't know. I'd like to maybe start a group inside the Slack for those kind of scientific-focused user interface, easing access thoughts, more on the researcher-aligned side. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else is interested in that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think the infrastructure level is a pretty well understood domain, certainly compared to how do we do the platforms on top in a a fully functional but secure way and easy to use. I mean, there's still an awful lot of work that needs to be understood around how we do platforms well. I don't think there is a good answer that's universal for that. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on, so yeah, it's certainly a good idea to have greater communication around that. Jeff's got his hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, I actually want to follow up on that point. I think that's a really interesting one. You're coming from sort of one end of the spectrum. We're coming from the other end of the spectrum. So, my background as a sysadmin, the team that I have reporting to me are all infrastructure people. We're technologists. We're not researchers or even research-adjacent people. We're research-interested people. And we have scientific support folks, and they are dear, cherished friends, and we do not understand what they do even a little bit. So I'm curious to know, just by sort of nods in the room, is that a common divide in people's organizations? Do you have a strong scientific group and a strong infrastructure group and somewhat a silo separation between them?
Yeah, is
I see a lot of nodding.
Conway's law or something, or is that the other way around, that software structure models organizational structure? Maybe it's one doing the other. I can't remember which one drives the other, but yeah, that definitely happens.
Because I suspect that the reason why we're having so much trouble getting to that platforms bit is that for us as infrastructure folks, it kind of feels like we're running out of oxygen. We're getting to the top of the atmosphere. This is about as far as we can go before we leave our mandate space. And we're not really going to know well what to do up there. The scientific folks, I think, are often sort of in the other end. They're not quite crossing over into our area. And so deploying something as complicated as a portal or our platform on top of OpenStack is not an insubstantial technical challenge. That might be more than they can or would choose to pick up. Who fills that middle space? He asked, providing no suggestions.
We haven't. Yeah, it's is now.
Yep,
It
yeah,
wa-
it's on.
maybe it wasn't before. I don't know. We have a unit, research computing, in IT that supports the research community because traditional IT is more focused on administrative and educational support roles. And we have within that unit our own scientific engagement professionals, infrastructure, and developers. We're not huge, but we have low barrier to conversation between the teams. And so just to your point, or I think, I don't know who said it, but I heard it. Is it the structure, like the organizational structure that kind of divides the conversation versus necessarily the software that divides the conversation. I guess I feel like I'm able to straddle that, just the difference between the scientific engagement. I'm pulled in a lot into scientific engagement conversations as the representative of infrastructure and what we can hopefully achieve with the capabilities that we have on our campus. And so I think it's possible, but it does require organizational coordination.
In the UK, they call it the RSEs, Research Software Engineers.
Yeah, that's a role that we're developing in our. To be able to hire people into it, we call them other things nowadays.
Nice things, sure.
Yes, all good, all good. Yeah, no, we're all friends.
Yeah, great. Who would like to pick up on? There's a question down at the bottom which I was hoping to pick up on. Oh, someone is already. What else could or should this group, the SiG, be doing to do better in terms of this sort of process of connecting or advocating or other things? So if anyone had any thoughts that they'd like to raise about that, I think Julia's point about having a kind of a connection to the TC would be a really good point, actually. Sure, what else?
So I guess my thing I'm trying to drive is active engagement of the feedback loop. And one of the things I have repeatedly said over the years is we are our own best advocates. That means we have to advocate for ourselves. We have to say, hey, we've got a problem or we have a need. And a body such as this, with this number of people that are like-minded, is a powerful statement. So if the SiG says, we need this, realistically, the developers should at least heed that as an input to use that to drive their backlogs. Doesn't mean it'll happen overnight, but if there are things that they can do, it brings value.
Yeah. I was thinking, Julia, just then, it's not just the TC. What about, so there's quite a lot of sort of creative ideas within this group about how to use things like SmartNICs and that kind of stuff. Should we be trying to advocate that to other projects like to the ironic networking?
We can. I think there are areas where certain things will create. It's a topic that will be quicksand, and what I mean by that is devices such as those are part of vertical integration plays by the hardware vendors, and so we will get stuck in those discussions because the hardware vendors really want to sell you one way to do things. And because everyone does different things differently, everyone has different base operating requirements, different partnerships, it's going to be a difficult path. And the only thing we can do is understand what others are doing and try and have some commonality that we might be able to share, but folks on like the vendor side might not be able to productize.
Yeah. Yep, that's true.
So, Jeff Albert, yes, wanted to empathize with you when, and actually the talk this morning that I missed, but I heard it from the car about the lessons learned. Like as soon as Robert Budden and I got the Explorer Cloud running, immediately all of our time was taken away for maintaining its basic care and feeding. All of our time was allocated for other projects, and that meant you know, upgrades never got done, and it just began to just rot and get brittle. And not every organization is going to have this ability, but you know, as I mentioned in my talk yesterday morning, what our organization is doing now to solve this is to break off our operations team into the day-to-day people versus the R&D people. So that allows Bob and I to continually do the care and feeding and the kind of research and community engagement that we need to figure out what the fixes are so we can help the operations team keep it up to date and keep it stable so that they don't have to continue to solve those problems. They can focus on helping the end users and so on and so forth.
John, I've got a question, because we have in our business considered, you know, this kind of split of having people who are focused more exclusively on that sort of far-reaching R&D. And whenever it comes up, because everyone thinks it's a brilliant idea, we say, well, that's great. Who doesn't want to be in that group? Mm-hmm. And it's nobody. So
yeah, it's not without contention within our organization either, but the government has defined that relationship by essentially putting the R&D team on a different contract. So they're different contract vehicles, and so there's no messing about, as if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of defined by the contractual requirements of each contract, so that there's very clear boundaries that are not to really be crossed.
Again, that's something the federal government can define that not every university organization can necessarily do in the same way.
Good point. While the mic's moving, I just want to say I particularly like Graham's analogy about the shark that stops swimming.
Yeah, just real quickly, I was thinking about messages to send to the TC, and I remember years and years ago, over 10 years ago, Dave asked me, we're thinking about putting in a grant proposal, talking about OpenStack. Do you think you can make it work? And I looked at Vanna, Grizzly, and last time, no, but yeah, maybe this time. I think we can make it work. But over the past 10 years, you know, there's very little I can think of that we actually need anymore. Like it's good. It's feature complete. There's not a lot to complain about. So I don't know if I speak for anybody else, but yeah, take that message back.
Does anyone remember how long this session is?
Nothing but time. Nothing but time.
Thank you.
We're good. I think this starts to open up a part of the conversation that we sometimes don't get to in SIG conversations, which is about resourcing and planning and funding. And I know this is intensely boring stuff because it's a lot more fun to talk about tech and software and the things that we can do with them. But certainly for those of us on the public sector and publicly funded side of things, I think this is a part of the conversation that actually does need to be opened up a bit. One of the things that I heard several times throughout talks today and yesterday, and that I've heard in conversation with everybody, is that everybody underestimated how much time and effort and cost it would take to operate an OpenStack cloud. We always knew it was going to be a bunch of work to stand it up, but then we kind of figured it would more or less run itself the way that enterprise software often does. Not that way. I don't think that's a weakness. I think that's built in, but I also think that it's something that's not necessarily widely understood. So I know when I started doing Arbutus Cloud, it was me and one coworker. I was the OpenStack guy, he was the Ceph guy, and the two of us together built the whole thing, which was insane. We should not have done that. And then we operated it for 2 years with no help, which was insane, and we should not have done that. But we did do that because that was what was granted. That was what was budgeted. And as much as I would complain about that budget process, there was no way for the decision makers who were involved in it to have a reasonable picture of what it might cost to operate that system. They didn't know, and there was nowhere to look. So that, I think, is something that a SIG could actually produce, is a reasonable estimate of, if you're going to get into this, here's what it might take. Here are the FTEs that it might take for you to do this. And I understand that that maybe seems a bit risky because we're admitting that there's a real cost. But on the other hand, the other thing that I saw on the slide today was that, somebody's OpenStack deployment, they calculated as being about 11 times cheaper than the commercial cloud equivalent. So if it was only like 8 times cheaper because we paid for enough staff, that'd still be really cheap, right? Something to think about, maybe.
Yeah, good point. I mean, it's a bit sensitive, but I'm sure there are places that wouldn't mind saying, we manage this scale of cloud with this number of people.
Yeah, just wanted to mention, I think this also really ties into the conversations about reference architectures or the lack thereof. You want not just a reference architecture, but this will serve this kind of workload for this many users, and here's what it'll cost.
Good point. Okay.
The numbers we've come up with, being very conservative, is at least a 3x cost difference between what we would spend in the cloud running those systems full-time over the course of a year than what it would cost to purchase it and put it in-house, and power costs and people time, FTEs. I think we need more FTEs. What's that? Yeah. And that's just year one costs. Once you get beyond that, it's significantly more expensive because we can keep the equipment.
One, I guess, other thought I had is, of this cost to operate, how much of that cost comes from everyone's implemented it slightly differently, and I think we're all writing our own tools for, how do I find out what users are on this? Oh, they're billed to some separate project. How are we managing that? How do we track this down? How do we map this into whatever external constraints we have? And what does that mean day to day?
It's a good point. I mean, I think operations tools tend to be quite sort of well wrapped around the interfaces of each particular cloud and the external interfaces of user management services. So it may not always be as portable as we'd like, but then there is something in the middle there. I mean, way back, I think the Cernops used to produce quite a nice sort of repo on GitHub for things like project deletion and resource cleanup. That kind of stuff is pretty generic, and yes, you're right. Sharing that kind of capability is a useful thing to do.
Yeah, on the accounting and tools side, I think we've really struggled with this because every organization is funded somewhat differently, potentially by different upstream sources. I mean, we're involved in a Canadian, but also international funding stream situation. Many folks who will be involved in U.S. funding situations that are just different and have different requirements, different reporting needs, and generally don't break down to what a business's reporting requirements tend to be, which are dollars. Everything's fungible to a dollar. We've really resisted going that way. We've had several proposals to come up with some kind of costing model and bill people in a fake currency amount just to give them some sense of what their infrastructure costs them. There's been a lot of resistance to that because it's not generally the way that things are viewed in the research community, at least not in Canada. But I do think that at some point we need a common way to describe the cost of infrastructure to the end user as well. And I mean, dollars or an equivalent currency is probably the simplest way to do that. I don't know that we'll ever get to a place where everybody has a compatible enough set of upstream requirements that we could build the common case for that, but at least having a common set of practices. I mean, everybody needs to provision a project, right? Everybody needs to be able to map identities to a project. These are basic things. I know we've written this script like 4 times. I used to give that as an interview question because everybody needs to do it. So could we standardize? Yeah, we could. Are we going to do that, though? Well, a group like this maybe could coordinate something like that.
I mean, the easy thing to do is to share information, share working solutions, and then help people take those off the shelf. I don't think there would ever be a single solution for any of these things, but at least having something you can crib from is a huge help really to other people. On the monetizing side of things, that's an interesting area. So one of the things that we've been looking at with Blazar for a project in the UK is essentially tying credits, funny money, to a Blazar reservation, so that you could say if a project has resource funding from the national funding body, they can spend it by making reservations on national infrastructure, and that sounds really good, but it also makes me quite uneasy because it sort of turns us into a bank. You know, that's not really what the Python code is really written for. But, oh, cool. Oh, pass around.
No, wait, what you just described is basically how Jetstream is allocated. We have a national funding body, and if your research project has a grant, or even if you don't have such a grant, you can apply for an allocation. You get time. You get fake money that you spend with Jetstream, not typically on reservations, but on just on instances that you create on demand, and storage as well, sort of in theory. I built the accounting system from scratch in Python. I don't love it. It's homegrown, but it works for us. I mean, but I could talk more about it, but I think that's not an uncommon need. And there are several different real money billing systems wrapped around OpenStack. I think CloudKitty one of them back in the day. Like there are a bunch of like sort of dead projects that tried to do that. I think what's it called? Skyline, the user interface, also sort of tried to do that, or at least expose that. So
we do have customers who use CloudKitty,
right,
and it's linked into the Prometheus monitoring.
Yeah, but those projects are all basically a credit, like a post-usage billing system rather than a debit system where you get an allocation and you spend it down. I think that is, I'd like to hear other perspectives, but I think the more common thing in scientific computing is you give people something to spend and then they spend it down, rather than you let them do whatever they want and then you send them a bill at the end.
Yeah.
I know we're not the only shop who's trying to do that, and I would love for the thing we use for that to not be scabby and homegrown because I built it from scratch. I don't know of anything else though.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. We break everything down to this imaginary allocation unit, $20, whatever you want to call it, McDonald's bucks, and they spend that down every year. We figure out some way to come up with a unit value for the resource, and then they're allocated so much of that resource, which equals money for our governing three-letter acronym entity, and then when they go over that budget, which they will often, or they won't, and we bust it down by quarter because we can't do it all at the end of the year, which is where everybody wants to cram all their code. But at that point, we can give them access to an overflow queue. So if there happen to be cycles open at the moment, they can get those, but they get that at a lower priority for other jobs that are still in there. But it's really common. I think projects get grant money gets allocated somewhere, and then we spend it down.
I'm gonna pass to Doug down here. Yeah, you got your hand up.
First time caller, all that. So I hope I'm not misunderstanding, but OpenStack, I hope, is writing out accounting of utilization, and that what Chris was describing is, what we struggle with on the HPC side from center to center is you've got allocations management, you've got the raw accounting logs, and then you have billing. And so the middle one should be done. Accounting logs should be there. Is that not the case with OpenStack?
Yeah, so usage accounting of, what a project has actually been consuming on the cloud. Yeah, the service that typically provides that is this one that was mentioned called CloudKitty. And yeah, we have a few clients who use that and run their business off it. But yeah, it doesn't deal with like dollars. It deals with units of something, which you would then add a bill to.
You can also look at the Nova's instance event history table and treat it as an event stream and build your own accounting from that. And that's what we ended up doing. I think the event stream is reliable enough to use that as the record of what was consumed. But yeah, I don't know of anyone else hooking into it like that the way that we are.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, that there's the nice thing to do would be able to combine them both, because so the event stream, yeah, you get a start event and an end event for a machine. If you miss either of those two, you don't really know when it started or ended. With CloudKitty, you get every period, you get this instance existed, and so if you have like things popping up and down all the time, they can fall into the gaps between these polling intervals. So
yeah, if you got very fine-grained events that don't get logged, and that sounds like the problem that we ran into with Kubernetes, because we do have Kubernetes, not OpenStack, where we scrape Prometheus to basically write out symbol accounting logs so that we can translate that into what we put into our billing system.
Between a time series and a stream of events.
and yeah, you're right. Oh, Michael.
You know, we're solving the same problem in a slightly different way, where we're generally not billing for instance usage because we're doing reservations. We're billing for when it reserves a resource. But generally, what we've had to do is we have some great big scripts that go through and pull data directly out of the database and look at, you know, last created at and modified at events or dates for, you know, Nova instances, floating IPs, networks, reservations, whatever other thing. And I think some kind of interface to this that's not directly munging the database would be amazing.
I think we are nearly out of time. 2 minutes, is that? Okay. Last thoughts.
I was just going to say we originally looked at CloudKitty back in 2017-18, and I guess I'd admit we completely copped out, and we based our subscription service on purely like quotas for the project. So yeah, 32 vCPUs, you get X gigs of memory, X terabytes of block storage, and you know that's what you're paying for, whether you use it or not. And I don't think that'll scale to the new world of, you know, Kubernetes and things, but it worked at the time. I'd love to see something better. I'm kind of curious if anyone has looked at tying in with HPC allocations. Like I think ColdFront from University of Buffalo has some kind of OpenStack plugin for provision project.
So Blair is interested in ColdFront. I think he's been asking about that on the SiG channel. Okay. In our space, there's a project called APEL, which I think comes out of CERN, and it ties in together with a Slurm resource accounting system as well. I don't know how it does that, but it does. Oh,
I just wanted to say, so on the APEL front, so we loved APEL very much when we were running batch stuff for Atlas, and ended up having to redeploy when we went to Kubernetes. We deploy our Atlas Tier 2 site on Kubernetes now. So we had to write a version of APEL that would work for that. So we wrote KPEL, which is now Quantify with a K, which, right, come on, which is another.
That's corny with a K.
Ourselves solution to this stuff. So we've actually made it worse. We're making it worse. We really do need a way to solve this. Like you, we're doing quotas only, and our funders are kind of like tolerating that, but they don't love it, and I don't blame them. So I actually think this is something that maybe, again, a group like this probably has some better visibility into because we have similar needs. CloudKitty was optional at the time, still optional now. Gnocchi and the other metrics things were kind of optional at the time and are still optional now. We still don't have any idea about utilization inside an instance. So sure, you've got a running instance, but what's it doing? Are you even using any of that CPU? We don't know. So a lot of questions there yet to be answered, and still no sort of core OpenStack way to do it. That's something I would like.
Good point to close on. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. There is a link to the Scientific SiG Slack channel for anyone who isn't on there. You'd be very welcome to just sign up and join. It's not like a massively distracting thing. It's very low level, but it'd be great to see new people join that. So thank you.